Salam Salam. Just let me know. Take these keys off. Okay. All right, Shaikh Omar. Ready?
Sorry.
Okay. You already started the live?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, tight. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Al-Ghani al-Hamid al-Azuz Al-Ghani al-Hamid al-Aziz al-Qahar Fatir al-Samawat wal-Ard عالم الغيب والشهادة هو الرحمن الرحيم وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله خليله وحبيبه أفضل الخلق وسيد الأنبياء والمرسلين خاصة له شفاء بإذن الله تبارك وتعالى على يوم الدين. ثم ما بعد فإن خير كلام الله سبحانه وتعالى وخير هدى هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم فإن كل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار وبعد. This is the fourth seminar which we started on Yom al-Jumu'ah. Started Friday afternoon and we went from that day up until now. So this is the fourth session, the fourth seminar on the Al-Arba'in Al-Imam Sharaf al-Din Abi Zakaria wa huwa Yahya bin Sharaf al-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, the great Imam known as Imam al-Nawawi. Ma ta'liqat li الإمام المحدث الفقيه عبد الرحمن بن أحمد بن عبد الرحمن ibn Rajab al-Hanbali. These two great scholars from the Muslim legacy and from our scholars of al-Islam. Imam al-Nawawi kana shafi'iyyun fil fiqh. He was a scholar who learned the teachings and the ways of Imam al-Shafi'i. And Imam Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali, he was a scholar who learned the teachings of the madhab, the teachings of Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal. But however, that did not prevent them from honoring the great work that Imam al-Nawawi wrote, the 40 Hadith, and then this Ibn Rajab, the great scholar who came 100 years after him plus, then explained this book. This book, we said before we continue, is a book reading, and we give some small commentaries from Ibn Rajab. Not from myself, it's from Ibn Rajab. And then you also have this reading of the book is to familiarize those who don't know about this great work with the work, and those who have read it, know about it, to review it, to remind themselves of the great aspects of Islam. Because this book, one of the greatnesses of the authorship of this book is that it has been comprised of every aspect that the Muslim needs in his life, every aspect, and his virtues. And so this is the greatness of this book, and the scholars of the past and the present have mentioned no one should be without the likes of this book and his or her house, his or her library, reading and benefiting from this book. We also said that the seminar For those who complete the seminar, then they will get a certificate of completion. They will get what's called ijaza in Arabic. And it doesn't mean that you're an expert in this now, you're a big scholar, or that you can go and debate and argue. I studied this book, I know this, I know that. But the object of the certificate is to show some type of achievement, some type of striving, and it is also something that requires, when you learn this type of book and you receive the certificate of completion, the ijazat, then what goes along with it from Allah the Almighty is that you be sincere to that learning. You be sincere to that book by trying to practice what you derived, what you have understood from that book. If you understand from that book, then it's compulsory for you to act upon it. And also, if you can benefit others from it, then you share it. But again, it doesn't make you a scholar. Doesn't mean that it's over. I did that book, because many books people have authored or taught over and over, read over and over, as the knowledge of Islam is like that for us. And we ask Allah to give us sincerity and truthfulness. Ameen. We arrived last night at the 32nd hadith. Hadith Ithnan wa Thalathun, 32nd. And that was the hadith where the Prophet, he mentioned from the hadith of Abi Sa'id al-Khudri radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. He mentioned that the Prophet said, and the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam qala la darara wa la dirar. And this Imam Ibn Majah, Daraqutni, and other great scholars collected it, and they said this hadith is Hasan. So this is where we left off last night, and I have just a few comments about this hadith, as we took maybe like 2 or maybe 3 points from this hadith last night. We stopped. This hadith, they translated as "let there be no harm nor reciprocating." And we said again, some of the translations are old. Some of the translations that people rendered, they had a good intention, inshallah ta'ala, to benefit the Muslims. But as Imam Muhammad Salih al-Uthaymin of our time, he used to say, for the one who's dealing with translation, they should be proficient in both languages. Proficient in both languages, the language that you translate from and the language that you translate to. And then secondly, that person should have some knowledge about the issue that he or she is dealing with, because every issue has its own mustalahat. Mustalahat is a term in Arabic, means technical language. And we understand that in the everyday world when you talk about doctors who speak the same language. But if a person went in and talked with the doctor started to use terms that only doctors know and medical professions use, then you will be lost, although you had the same initial language. So this is the same thing when you talk about the likes of this hadith of the Prophet. People sought to do a good deed. People tried. Inshallah, we hope they will be rewarded. But there are some things that need to be explained as it relates to translation, aside from the details that are needed for the likes of this hadith. So the point where we left the last night, the third point, or I'll go back and say from the beginning. The first point, we said this hadith establishes that there should be no intentionally harm to a person, nor should there be accidental harm. But the scholars, they said the first statement, la darara, means not to cause harm. Harm, darara, means harm. So here the Prophet said la darara. La means it's a prohibition, don't do it. So Rasulullah said la darara, don't cause harm. And the ulama, they said this first word, it means unintentionally. So if you unintentionally harm somebody, you can't say, oh, it was an accident, and be insensitive or, not care or not apologize. According to this hadith, you should still say, afu anni, please pardon me, I didn't mean it. Although you didn't mean it, you should say, Samitni, please pardon me, or you should say afwan, I'm sorry. You should say something. Don't just say, well, it wasn't intentionally. Why are you getting mad? No, because according to this first word in the hadith, la darara means harm that's unintentionally. And then you have the second word, wala dirar. And the first one has a fatha. If you know anything about Arabic, it has an uppercase, the A sound. The second word has a kesra, a lowercase, dirara. So they said the second one means you can't do something intentionally, while the first word, which they're similar, it means don't do anything to someone harmful unintentionally. And so this is the point we mentioned last night. And then inshallah tabarak wa ta'ala, we will continue with a few points about this hadith before we go to hadith number 33. The second point is that some scholars, they said that this is similar, point number 2. This hadith of the Prophet, la darara, which we will translate, no harm unintentionally should be done, wala dirara, neither harm intentionally to another person. That's the best translation in opposition to what may be in the book. The first statement, la darara, let there be no harm unintentionally, wala dirara, nor intentionally to another. That's the meaning of the hadith, and that should be the translation. Point number 2, they said this is similar, that hadith, to another hadith with the Prophet. He said, man dagara Allahu alayhi, whoever harms, Allah will cause harm back or allow that person to be harmed. Wa man shaqqa Allahu alayhi, and whoever causes difficulty, then Allah will cause difficulty to be brought back upon that person. So this is point number 2, that they said this is similar, this hadith and the 40 hadith, to this other hadith which the Prophet mentioned, which you can find this one in the end of Bulugh al-Maram and Kitab al-Jami', the comprehensive essentials for every Muslim, which we had the privilege to teach last year in North and South Carolina. So point number 2, this proves that it's a threat. The point of the Prophet saying, let not unintentional nor intentional harm be done to anybody in this hadith and for the hadith, because point number 2, there's another hadith where the Prophet said, man darra Allahu alayhi, whoever causes harm to somebody, may Allah, and that Allah will allow them to have harm done back to them. Man shaqqa Allahu alayhi, and whoever causes difficulty to somebody, then Allah will allow difficulty to come upon that person to be done to them. And this is similar to, you shall reap what you sow. So this is the second point, that hadith is similar to the hadith in 40 hadith. You also have number 3, another wording that says la darara wa la dirara fil islami. La darara wa la dirara fil islami. Point number 3. There should be no unintentional harm to a person allowed, nor intentional harm allowed to a person in Islam, meaning Islamically. Because, of course, outside of Islam and in the days of before Islam and Jahiliyyah, that wasn't the rule. They would harm people intentionally, unintentionally. Most people didn't have these etiquettes. They lost them. So that's point number 3. Then you have point number 4, another wording. The hadith of Abi Salama, he said that the Prophet ﷺ said, man darra Allahu bihi, whoever causes some harm, then Allah will cause that person to be harmed by that harm. SubhanAllah. Whoever causes some harm to somebody, then Allah will cause that person to be harmed by it, that which they harm somebody with or by. And then the other word, وَمَنْ شَقَّ, the rest of that hadith, شَقَّ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ, and whoever causes difficulty to someone, then Allah will cause or allow difficulty to be caused to them. And Imam al-Tirmidhi said this hadith is Hasan Gharib. It's okay, it's sound, although it's only one wording and one narrator. So this, these are the 4 points. The first point, we said the hadith in the beginning, which is in the book 40 Hadith of Sallam, mentioned La darara wa la dirar. Let there be no harming unintentionally, nor harming intentionally done to anyone. The second point, they said this matches the hadith of the Prophet said, Man darra darra Allahu alayhi. Whoever causes some harm to someone, Allah will allow that harm to be caused to him. Shaqqa Allahu alayhi. And whoever causes difficulty, then Allah will cause difficulty to be upon the one who made the difficulty. And then point number 4, the hadith of Abi Salama, he said the Prophet Sallam said, which is a slightly different wording, has a slightly different meaning. Man darra Allahu bihi. Whoever harms somebody, Allah will cause that person to be harmed by that thing that he harmed that person by. And then the second part is similar to the previous hadith. Man shaqqa Allahu alayhi. Whoever causes difficulty, Allah will make difficulty upon them. You also have point number 5 of Salam. He said mal'una. Mal'una from the word la'in. So the Prophet said mal'una man dara mu'minan aw makkara bih. Prophet Sallam, he said, the person who harms the Muslim, the believer, mal'una man dara musliman aw mu'minan, whoever causes harm. And now this is talking about intentionally. Whoever causes harm intentionally to the believer, the Prophet said, Mal'una, they are from those who are cursed. Yeah, those who are cursed. And the meaning curse could mean, in Arabic, this word, Mal'una, could mean that they are doing a major sin, of course, which Allah will punish them for if they don't stop and make repentance. And then the other meaning of Mal'una is that they are bur' min rahmatillah tabaraka wa ta'ala, because of that sin that Allah's messenger is making particular to being in this state which we call cursed. Then this also includes the meaning of being far removed from receiving mercy from Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala because of that sin. So the Prophet said, Mal'una man darra al-mu'minin. Now, man darra, mal'una man darra, yani al-mu'minin. Whosoever purposely harms the believers, then they are in a state where Allah will not show them mercy. They are removed from Allah's mercy, and they are going to be committing a major sin. And it also includes they will be known by the worst names and descriptions. These are the 3 meanings of Latin, which they normally translate as curse. You will be known by the worst name and description. You will be far removed from the mercy of Allah, number 2. And number 3, it is a major sin, that act. And then the Prophet said, Man makkara yani al-muslimin, and whoever plots against the Muslims, these 2, whoever causes the harm and plot, then the Prophet called them al-una, those who are far removed from Allah's mercy, committing a major sin, and they will be known by the worst name and description if they don't stop and repent. Point number 6, they said, the scholars differ. Does this hadith, the 2 words, darra and dirar, do they have different meanings or do they mean the same? Because the wording is dad, ra, and ra. Those are the 3 letters. And they're pronounced different because of the harakat, the marks in the word. So darra is the first word, and dirara is darra is the first word, and dirar is the second word. So the question the scholars were asked, do these 2 words carry the same meaning or not? Some of them said yes, both words mean the same, although they are pronounced differently, slightly differently in their pronunciation. but from the same origin, so they mean the same. And that if they mean the same, then that means they're mentioned for emphasis, because when something is to be emphasized, then in Arabic you can mention it more than one time. Others said no, they are not the same. Some of them said they're not the same, but rather the first word is a what's called ism. It's a theme, like we say a noun. So they said the first word is a noun, while the second word is a fi'l, is an action. So if it took the meaning, the first word is a noun, the second word is an action, a verb, then it will mean la darara. There's no thing of harm to be done somebody else, wala dirar, nor action to be done to someone else. So this is if one of them is a noun and the other one is an action. Now, like for example, a thing would be to turn your back on somebody when they need your help, that harms and hurts, or to not speak to somebody when they speak to you. That's a thing. Some would say an action too. But then if you want to make an action, you will say to hit that person, that's an action. Or to insult that person to their face, then that's an action. So this is one of the points, and that's the 6th point. And then the 7th point, they said the first word, la darara, means that you harm somebody who has done nothing to you. And this is part of the beginning, what I explained. It said, the first word, you harm someone who does not harm you, la darara. So that means you harm somebody, but he didn't do anything to you. And then they said the second word, wala dirar, it means that you harm somebody who harmed you, but you harm them in a way that's not permissible. Ala waji ghayri jahiz, in a way that's not permissible, because Allah has set restrictions, boundaries. So if someone, for example, pushes you, then you could forgive them or you could push them back. But you can't push them back, smack them, knock them down. You went too far. So the second wording, wala dirar, they said means harming somebody who harmed you while you go beyond the limits. So this is 7 points from the hadith that we started last night, hadith number 32. The second hadith or I should say the next hadith, hadith number ثلاثة وثلاثين. ثلاثة وثلاثين. That is number 33. Did we take that hadith last night?
No.
We didn't?
Stopped at 32.
Okay. Hadith number 33. So that's so you want to read it, you want me to read from memory?
I'll read it.
Okay. You got the mic, right? For people who's upstairs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, تفضل.
عن ابن عباس رضي الله عنهما أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال لو يعطي الناس
بدعواهم
بدعواهم لا أدعى رجل أموال قوم ودماءهم لكن البين على المدعي على المدعي
نعم
واليمين على من أنكر
من أنكر. نعم بارك الله فيك. This hadith, the Prophet ﷺ is mentioning a small hadith, like the hadith that just preceded it, but it has a great benefit, great meaning, especially when you talk about people who's making claims about things. People want to take people's land and people's property. So the Prophet is saying here, Lo yu'ta rajulan aw lo yu'ta nasa. It's one word that says rajulan, yani meaning a man. If I were to give a man, lo yu'ta nasa, if we were to give the people. So both of them have the same meaning, but the Prophet used to talk in plural and in singular for reasons. So he's saying the same thing. Lo yu'ta rajulan, lo yu'ta nasa. If we were to give people the benefit of the doubt, or the green line, the green light, pardon me, we were to give people the benefit of the doubt, or to give a man the green light, the okay, to take what he's claiming to be true. It says la da'a rijalan, la da'a yani rijalun. Then those people who made the claim, they would make the claim be yani be amwalin rijalan wa dima'ahum. They would then make claims on people's or other men's property in their life. So this hadith, the Prophet is saying, if people were to come and make a claim and we sided with them, we believed them, what they would do based on that was take people's wealth and their life unjustifiably without any proof. So then that's why the Prophet, he said, yani al-yamin ala yani mudda'a. That part of the hadith means whoever's making the claim about something, yani, that yamin here means he has to bring some witnesses. This is what yamin means. Sometimes yamins mean in English, jiha, in Arabic, a direction. This is your right hand, so you say yad yamin. Or yani the opposite is shimal, yani the left, or sometimes they call it yasar. But yamin here also means yani sometimes to yani swear. Like they say halaf al-yamin. That means somebody doesn't believe you, now you have to swear, and if you swear, that means you're telling the truth. And that's how it was back in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, because people were trustworthy. Today, if somebody halafa al-yamin qad yum kadiban, he could be yani lying, but he's just swearing because he wants you to buy his story. So yamin in this hadith, Prophet is talking about a person who yani yadda'i shay, he claims something. That's my money. Prophet said yani, but that person has yadda'i al-yamin. He has to bring his proof, no matter who he is. Has to bring his proof yani for his claim, or have some just witnesses that can attest to what's being stated yani, to be true. And this, the ulama, they said, this yamin, because people will think, what does this right mean? Like you say, malik yamin, yani mulk yamin, right hand possess. So normally yamin is used for good things, possessing something, eating something, drinking something. Prophet said, La tashrab bishimal, la tashrab bishimal. Don't drink with the left. Inna shaitan yashrab, yashrab, inna shaitan yashrabu bishimali. Said, don't drink with the left, because the shaitan drinks with his left. So the Muslim shouldn't drink with the left. He also said, La ta'ku bishimali. Don't eat with the left, because the shaitan eats with the left. So all of the things on the right are good. So you want to claim somebody's property, you want to claim somebody's life, somebody's land. The Prophet is saying that you have to come with your proof. And this is why he's mentioning an yamini, bringing something to prove that you and your claim are legitimate. He said, and this yameen is for the people that have nizar, they have a debate, ma'adama al-bayan, without proving it. Then the alternative, swear. The real muttaqi, the real person of belief, is not going to swear and lie. They're going to leave the issue, walk away, because they know they don't have proof, and he's sure and she's sure not going to lie, and it's over. So the Prophet is saying this to people who understood the principle that he taught them from Islam. When you have a debate about something or some property or somebody's thing, then if you don't have your dalil, you don't have your proof, you don't have your witnesses, the last alternative is halaf al-yamin. You have to swear by it. And they said, the scholars, أَمَّا الْيَمِينُ فَهُوَ يُثَبِّتُ بِالْحَقِّ. It is something that's supposed to prove and fix date the truth. But again, you're talking about many of these hadith that we have covered, talking about the characteristics of the believer. A believer is not going to lie about something and swear on top of it. But the swearing is when you don't have a proof, you don't have witnesses, but that claim you're making is true, then the Prophet is saying, Yani an yamini. You're going to, an yamini means you're going to swear. And then that swearing, Yani, for the truthful one, that's the end of the thing. Your claim can be taken. So this, Yani, is two ways. Yani, thabata fi sunnati rasulillah, Yani, tariqataini. One, bring your witnesses, or you swear, halaf an yamin. Swear, which means the term yamin, because this is used for good things. Yamin. Tayyib. And then the Prophet said about the one who's going to reject that claim. Radda yamin. Radda yamin. Now, the one who's rejecting that swearing. They said, no, it's lying. You got two people debating. He said, that's my money. He said, what's your proof? I know I had it in my pocket. I dropped it. Then the other person says, no, that's not your money. That's my money. The Prophet going to tell you, bring your proof. You're going to have two witnesses. He can't take your word because there's a debate. Then you have to halaf on yamin if you're truthful. If you're not sure, like we covered the hadith about doubt and so forth, then you say, well, I'm not going to halaf on yamin. I'm not going to swear because really I'm not 100% sure. The other person, if you keep debating and saying, I'm sure, then he's going to, what do you mean? He's going to reject even if you say, I swear it's mine. If that person who is the opposing side still knows that you're lying, he's going to reject your swearing. This is what the Prophet is saying in the other part of that hadith. So this is the 33rd hadith. And this is a principle when there's some type of debate between two people and the person is making a claim, mudda'i, he's making a claim without witnesses or proof, then he can swear. And the swearing is supposed to make his statement qawi, if he's trustworthy. And if he's not, then the other side, radda yamin, this is the meaning of inkar, or he's going to reject it if the person swears while he's lying. The next hadith, and Abi Sayyid al-Qudri, hadith hadith al-Rabi wa Thalathin, hadith number 34.
عن أبي سعيد الخدري رضي الله عنه قال سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول من رأى منكم منكرا فليغيره بيده فإن لم يستطع فبلسانه فإن لم يستطع فبقلبه وذلك أضعف الإيمان رواه مسلم.
This hadith of Abi Sa'id al-Khudri radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. He was the narrator of many hadith. And Nabi Sa'id, he's from the ulama al-sahaba, the scholars of the disciples of the Prophet. وَهُوَ مِنْ كِبَارِ الْعُلِمَائِهِمْ, and he's from the high level of the scholars, Abi Sa'id al-Khudri. He's the narrator of this hadith. And this hadith, the Prophet, he mentioned different types of wordings, different occasions for this aspect of Islam. And that is when you see some type of evil. Man ra'a minkum munkaran, whosoever sees some type of evil. And the ulama, they said the word ra'a, which normally means seen, it also means that if something reaches you and you're sure about it. So ra'a here means to see, and it also means to know. Has two meanings, to see and to know. And we're talking about knowing without any speculation, you know. Like, for example, if I say the Masjid Mutakabbir is on Main Street, and somebody said, nah, man, it's not on Main Street, it's on Grand Street. I know. I've been teaching and coming to this masjid for 3 years. Somebody just came yesterday or a week, and he makes that. So that I know. Likewise, if someone looks at the sign and said, oh yeah, I see the sign right there, it says Main Street. One of them because he sees it, the other just because he knows. So Rasul said, man ra minkum munkaran, whoever from amongst you sees a evil. Then the Prophet says, فَيَغَيَّهُ بِيَدِهِ, let him change it with his hand. فَإِلَّمْ تَسْتَطِعْ فَبِلِسَانِهِ, if he can't change it with the hand, without, and here the clause not able doesn't mean physically. It's the same way when you talk about marriage. The Prophet said, فَبَلَّمْ يَسْتَطِعْ, whoever cannot marry. But he's not talking about or the one who doesn't have physical ability to marry, because Allah created most people with that, unless you have a special case. Most people have private parts and have hormones and desires, then they're able to perform sexually. So the Prophet wasn't talking about physical inability when it comes to marriage. He was talking about monetarily, some type of way to take care of that woman. Likewise here, the Prophet is not talking about the person, his hand is broke, so he can't move his hand, so he can't change something that's bad to good. He's not talking about the person, his tongue, he's a person who can't speak, or his mouth is glued or taped shut. No, the Prophet is saying circumstantially, whosoever has the ability. If you don't have the ability, he's talking about circumstantial. So the Prophet said, and if you can't change it with your hand circumstantially, it's going to be too much. It's going to make a greater problem than you're trying to solve. It's going to bring more harm upon you and people around you. Then you leave it. And if you can't do the same thing with the tongue without having a greater harm happen, a greater problem than you're trying to solve, a greater issue of oppression that already exists. If you can't do it without it escalating to more, then the Prophet said, فَبِقَلْبِهِ, then you change that thing with your heart. And the Prophet said, وَذَلِكَ أَضْعَفُ الْإِيمَانِ, that is the weakest of faith. What time is it?
7:05.
Point number one from this hadith is general. Point number one, it's general. It's general. Meaning for whosoever the hadith reaches and they're able to change this thing without making a greater harm based upon their level of iman, because it takes faith, strength, spiritually and physically to change things, to face the opponent, to face evil. Then it's based upon each person's belief, their iman, their faith, inner and outer strength, and their circumstance and their ability. And the reason we say it's general, because some people said changing it with the hand is for the people who have power, like the military and the armies. Changed it with the tongue is for the scholars who speak and preach and the people who are politicians, and changing it or hating it in the heart is for the common folk. But this is not true, because the hadith is general. The word man in Arabic means whosoever, male, female. It doesn't make a difference, young, old. So that's the first point. The hadith is general. The second point, the condition to change it based upon if that person changing it is going to bring about more good than bad. If the person's change is going to bring about more good than bad, then you change it. Point number 3, if the circumstances are in your favor. Point number 3, the circumstances are in your favor. You have the support, you have the ability, you have the tools, and you change it. Point number 3, we said again, you have the support, the strength, the people, the ability, to support, the tools. That's point number what? 3. Point number 4. Point number 4, changing it with the heart. This means that you dislike it in your heart. Because all of these 3 steps are something that the Prophet said, yani, is a thing that you're trying to change. And you're changing and wanted to change something because you dislike it. So the last part is the last resort. The last resort, meaning you can't change it by the other 2 ways, so you hate it in the heart. Hating it in the heart is how you change it, meaning if Allah blessed you to be able to change it with the other 2 that preceded, the hand or the tongue, you would do it. That's the meaning of hating it in the heart. Point number 6, and the Prophet ﷺ, he also mentioned this as it relates to people changing the religion. He mentioned this. He mentioned this as it relates to people changing the religion after him, that you will see people changing the religion. And he said, وَمَنْ جَادَ يعني وَمَنْ جَادَ يعني عَلَيْهِمْ فهو مؤمن فمن جادهم بيده فهو مؤمن. So whoever fights against them, فمن جاده بيده فهو مؤمن. Now, so he says, so whoever fights against them with his hand, then he's a believer. وَمَنْ جَادَ يعني عَلَيْهِمْ بِلِسَانِهِ فَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ. Whoever fights against them يعني with his tongue, then he's a believer. وَمَنْ جَادَ يعني عَلَيْهِمْ بِقَلْبِهِ فَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ. And whoever hates what they're doing in his heart, then he's a believer. So the Prophet in the other hadith, he called changing some evil with the hand, the tongue, or the least thing to hate it in your heart is a type of jihad. He called you mujahid, one who's striving in the cause of Allah. And they said, that's point number 6, right? Yeah. And they said point number 7, this hadith came about by Abi Sa'id narrating this hadith because Marwan was the first person to try to, on the day of Eid, give the khutbah first and lead the salah. Marwan ibn Hakam, during his rule, he was the Khalifa. On the day of Eid, he wanted to give the khutbah first and lead the salah. Because the khutbah on Jummah, the khutbah is first and the salah is second. The sermon, the preacher, the Muslim, imam, scholar, student, he preaches first on Friday, then he leads the prayer. But on the day of Eid, after Ramadan is over, on the day of slaughter, commemorating Abraham, and the worship to Allah in Mecca at the sacred house, then both of those days, those celebrations, you make the prayer first, then you address the people. So Marwan wanted to change it. He said, I got a message, I'm going to drop it today, so I want to preach first and pray second. I want them to hear this thing. And when he got up there to do that, Abi Sa'id, in one narration, he said he pulled him from the minbar. And the people said, with commotion, hey, what you doing? Why you pulling him from the minbar? He said, did not you hear the prophet say, whoever sees the evil, let him change it with his hand? So this is the origin of this hadith, many of the scholars said. Of course, again, with the conditions that you have support, that you have the tools, you have the aid. If it's going to cause more of a commotion, then no, But in this case, we're just talking about how the incident came about. And the last point, that was point number 7. Point number 8, the person who hates it in his heart because he can't change it with his hand or his tongue doesn't negate him from being a believer, because the prophet said, وَذَلِكَ عَادَ iman. This is the weakest of faith. So some people think that means hate it in your heart makes your faith less than the other two who wants to, and that changes it with the hand and the tongue. But that's not the proper meaning. This means this is the least, هذا أدنى من الإيمان. This is the least a person can do who has faith. Their faith is the same. The only difference is the one who hates it in his heart doesn't have the ability circumstantially to change it by the hand or the tongue. If he could, he would. So that's the meaning of this is the weakest of faith. Not his faith is less than the other two. Because the condition is to have the weakest of faith, which means this the least you can do as a believer. The condition is to hate it in your heart. If Allah ever blessed you or gave you the privilege to change that thing, the ability to change that thing with the hand of the tongue, then you would do it. So this is the 8th point of that hadith. Faddal.
عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا تحاسدوا ولا تناجشوا.
Again.
لا تحاسدوا.
لا تحاسدوا.
ولا تناجشوا.
تناجشوا.
تناجشوا. ولا تباغضوا ولا تدابروا. ولا يبيع بعضكم على بيع بعض. وكونوا عباد الله إخوانا. المسلم أخو المسلم. لا يظلمه ولا يخذله ولا يكذبه ولا يحقره. التقوى ها هنا ويشير إلى صدر 3 مرات. بحسب امرئ من الشر أن
يحقر أخاه مسلم.
كل مسلم على المسلم حرام دمه وماله وعرضه.
أيوة.
رواه مسلم.
بارك الله فيكم. This hadith before we go to this hadith, one more point from the previous hadith. I gave how many points? 8 or 9? 8? 8. The 9th point. There's a narration, Ali ibn Abi Talib. This is the 9th point. Because we're talking about the issue of when there's some evil and you see it or you know about it, change it with your hand. The Prophet said, if you can't, meaning circumstantially, not physically, circumstantially, you don't have the ability to do it without causing a bigger problem or solving the problem or making the problem less that exists. He said, then you change it, you go to the next step. Try to change it with your tongue by speaking. If you can't do it with those two, then he said, yani, by the heart. And this is the least level of faith. Doesn't mean you're least Muslim than or least believer than the other two. This means this is the last category dealing with this issue for the believer. Ali, he said, there will come a time where sayakunu fitna, there will come a time that there's going to be so much turmoil that you can't taqyiruhu bi yad wala bil lisan. He said that you won't be able to change it, do anything about it with the hand, neither the tongue. This is Ali ibn Abi Talib. They said, what came for that? They said, how was that? What will we do? The Prophet he said, Ali, he said, he said, yunkirunahu bi qulubihim. Then they would disapprove of it in their heart. Meaning, you hate it, you feel bad about it, you don't like it, you despise it. And so when they asked the Prophet this, because Ali is narrating this story, but he heard it from the Prophet. That's the Prophet of Rasulullah. Hal tanqus imanuhum shay'a. Would this lower their iman any, because they simply hate it in the heart and not doing any action about it with the hand of the tongue? The Prophet he said, La, no, this won't decrease their iman any. So this, the Prophet mentioned, and Ali is narrating this. This is another point that it's important to look to see what the Sahaba understood from the Prophet's statements, because sometimes we can read something in the Quran or in the stories of the Prophet or the Hadith, but we come away with a perception that's unintended by Allah Azza wa Jal, Allah the Almighty, or His Messenger. So this is a benefit that I want to give. Point number 9, that it doesn't increase your faith. It doesn't, decrease your faith, because the only thing you can do is hate it, and you can't change it. Your hands or your tongue is tied because of the greatness of that calamity. Then when the hadith number 34, this hadith Abu Hurairah. And this hadith basically shows you to stay away from things that will cause hatred, enmity, and division between the believers. That's what this hadith illustrates. The Prophet said, La tahasidu. Don't envy one another. Tahasidu. This is action. And one of the things that comes out of this envy, when you envy somebody, the next thing you know is anger. Because the Prophet said, La taqla. Don't become or don't act out of anger. So here the Prophet said, La tahasidu. Don't envy one another. Wala tanashasu. Don't plot against one another. Wala tadabaru. Don't turn your backs on one another. And that means out of literal turning your back to somebody, they mention. So wala dubra anhu. You turn your back, you give them your backside. Like you don't want to talk to somebody, man. You just turn. Prophet said, don't do that. It also means don't boycott him. Don't leave him without giving him the salams. Rasulullah mentioned, La yuhillu li muslimin an yuhaja akhahu fawqa thalatha, that the Muslim should not abandon his brother or his sister more than 3 days. Prophet said more than 3 days because sometimes things happen. So you need some space to cool off. Leave him alone. He needs some space to cool off. He leaves you alone. But the Prophet said, Fawqa thalatha. You can't go more than 3 days. Why? Because more than 3 days falls under this prohibition, tadabaru. You're turning your back on your brother. There's another word, wala taqati'u. Don't cut him off. Don't cut him off. And then for some, wala bay'a. Bay'a ba'dukum ba'da. And don't out trade one another. We understand what that means. I got something for $10. The brother knows it. I got good business. Then when you go to his table, say, how much you pay for that? He know I got it for 10. You say 10. He said, man, that's too much. Listen, I got the same thing. Listen, I'll give you a deal. You take that back. I'll give you 2 for 8. Then you come back to me and say, I changed my mind. I don't want it. You don't tell me what's wrong. I give you your money back, give me the property, then you go to him, you get 2 for 8. This is the meaning of that. Don't undercut. You know what I'm saying? Don't undercut. Now also, it could mean, other meanings, but that's the main meaning the scholars they give from that hadith. And then it said that Al-Muslim akhul Muslim. The Muslim is the brother of another Muslim. Another word in the Prophet said, "Wakunu yani ibadallahi ikhwanan," and be servants of Allah, brothers to one another. And then the Prophet said, "Yani taqwa hahuna." Again, remember taqwa, khawf, yani niyya, khashya, all of those things in the heart. Taqwa meaning to do what Allah told you and stay away from the prohibited things. Khawf, you stop doing something because you're afraid Allah will punish you. Khashya, you learn something like this 40 hadith we're doing, and then you practice it. It makes you fear Allah because of the knowledge. This is Prophet Sallallahu said, taqwa hahuna. Not because you wear a certain garment, your beard looks a certain way, you walk with your head down. No. And taqwa hahuna. Not because you speak good, you quote. No. Taqwa hahuna. It's rooted in the heart. And then the Prophet ﷺ pointed 3 times to show the urgency of his message. And then he said, Kullu Muslim, yani, and then he said, La yathlimuhu. He doesn't wrong the other Muslim. If he's your brother, you don't wrong him. Wala yakhuduhu, yani, wala yakhuduhu, yani, you don't do him dirty. Wala yakdhibahu, you don't yani, lie to him, or some scholars say, or on him. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, yani, wala yahkiruhu, and you don't yani, hold him in contempt. Meaning, if he makes tawbah, he stops, leave him alone. La yahkiruhu. You know, don't hold him in contempt. This is a big problem today we have. People do something, and people don't even care if you make tawbah. They don't even care if you change. They just want to hold that thing over your head forever. We're talking about Muslims. How can you do that? The Prophet said, La yahkiruhu. Now, then the Prophet said, yani, talking about bihasabi, yani, al-shagr fihi, yani, it's enough, yani, that you hold him in contempt. Just that by itself is enough, yani, that you do that to your brother as a sin. All those other things in the hadith that came before it, just make it greater. You hold him in contempt, the Prophet ﷺ said, that's enough as a great sin. Now, Allahu musta'an. And then the Prophet ﷺ in the end, he said, Kullu Muslim ala Muslim haram. Every Muslim is supposed to treat the other Muslim like it's himself sacred, not to violate. As the Prophet ﷺ said in the other hadith, and yati yani ila nas kama yani yuta ilayh. Yani, do to the people like you would want them to do to you. So don't violate the Muslim, because the Muslim is sacred to the other Muslim. And then the Prophet detailed it, which he didn't have to, but for emphasis, malahu, yani damuhu wa ir, yani his wealth, his blood, meaning his life, including, and his honor. And this is the 4th hadith? 34, huh? 35 hadith, inshallah tabaraka wa ta'ala. Baki sab'a, we have 7 more after the adhan. Wa sallallahu baraka ala nabiyina Muhammad. Jazakumullah khair. Inshallah, we plan right after Salat to come